Why did you let him kill me? It was the clown. Make the clown go away.
New York has more than its fair share of sinister secrets and is home to some of the most haunted places in America. Some of the most notorious haunted locations are found not just in New York City, but across the state. Many of these legends and hauntings have served as inspiration for novels, movies, and TV shows. Today, we will look at 10 of the many urban legends the Empire State has to offer. The story of Cropsey is a nightmare come to life. At one time, Cropsey was just fiction. The boogeyman of Staten Island, rumored to be a homicidal madman and escaped mental patient with a hook for a hand who hunted children. Parents would use the story of Cropsey to frighten their children into being good and staying close to home, because Cropsey could be anywhere, waiting to strike. It was all just a made-up story, fiction, that is, until the 1980s. Suddenly, Staten Island boogeyman had come to life as an actual homicidal madman who really did hunt children, and his name was Andre Rand. Rand worked as a janitor at the Willowbrook State School, a place of horror to many. Willowbrook was built as a respite for children with intellectual disabilities and eventually revealed to be a living hell. The children, most who had been abandoned by their families and foster care, were subjected to sexual abuse, corporal punishment, severe overcrowding, and even unethical medical experiments. In 1972, all was revealed by Gerardo Rivera. The school officially closed in 1987. The same year the School of Horrors closed, Andre Rand, the former janitor, was arrested in connection with the disappearance of Jennifer Schwager, a 12-year-old girl with Down syndrome. At the time of his arrest, Rand was living in a makeshift camp on the abandoned school grounds, which wasn't far from Seaview Hospital that had been closely tied to the Cropsey legends. A month after her disappearance, Jennifer's body was found in a shallow grave on the school grounds where Rand was living. He was then charged with her murder. When Rand was arrested, he had already had a long list of crimes against children. In 1969, he was sentenced to 16 months for attempted sexual assault of a 9-year-old girl. In 1983, he went to jail for kidnapping a bus full of children. Although there wasn't enough evidence to charge him, Rand was suspected in several other disappearances going back a decade. The jury in the case couldn't come to a verdict on the murder charges because there wasn't enough evidence, but he was found guilty of kidnapping and received 25 years in prison. Rand would have been eligible for parole in 2008, but in 2004, new evidence found linking him to the disappearance of Holly Ann Hughes, a 7-year-old that went missing from Staten Island in 1981. Evidently, a fellow inmate had taken notes of conversations he had with Rand, in which he describes in detail her abduction. Rand was convicted again on kidnapping and sentenced to an additional 25 years. He will not be eligible for parole until 2037, when he will be 93 years old. The similarities between the Cropsey legend and Rand's story still fascinate people today. Filmmakers Joshua Zeman and Barbara Brancato grew up on Staten Island, hearing the legends of Cropsey as children. As adults, their curiosity led them to dig deeper into the legends and real cases of missing children from Staten Island. Their chilling documentary, Cropsey, explores the bizarre case of the boogeyman who came to life. Belhurst Castle's history goes back a long time. The property Belhurst sits on today was the site of the Seneca Indian village in the early 18th century. In 1810, the property became home to the Ontario Glass Company. When they closed, the land was divided. In 1824, Joseph Fellows, a lawyer from England, bought a parcel of land, and 10 years later built a residence he named Hermitage, which means secluded residence. Joseph did not live in the home, but under a deed of trust, William Henry Buck did. Buck used an alias name, Henry Hall, at the time. Henry lived alone except for one servant at Hermitage. After falling and breaking his leg, Henry died of blood poisoning shortly after. After his death, it was found out that Henry was a fugitive from London for embezzlement and that he had fled to America under the name Henry Hall. It is believed that Henry was the one who had the escape tunnels built below the residence. In 1852, Harrison G. Otis bought the property and named it Belhurst, which means beautiful forest. The property remained in the Otis family until 1878, when they relocated to Virginia and the United States Trust Company took over. The property became known as Otis Grove and served as a popular picnic area for local residents. Carrie M. Harron from New York City bought the property in 1885. At the time, she was the wife of Samuel V. Harron, who soon divorced him. Not long after the divorce, she began construction on the current 4-story mansion. 50 men worked for more than 4 years to build the castle. When it was finally completed, only 48 made it. One man went insane while working on the roof, and another fell from the tower, killing him. Carrie died in 1926, and Belhurst Castle passed to her grandson, Hal Harron Jr., who sold it to Cornelius J. Dwyer. Dwyer opened a speakeasy and casino in the castle. Gambling was held upstairs, but the liquor was run down from Canada using the canal system and tunnels under the house during Prohibition. In 1952, the casino shut down and the castle was sold to Robert and Nancy Golden in 1975. The castle's restaurant continued, and the Goldens turned the second and third floors into guest rooms and opened a hotel. On November 2, 1992, Dwayne Reeder became the current owner. Besides the deaths that have occurred on the property, there is also a legend attached to Belhurst Castle. According to the legends, a beautiful Italian opera singer named Isabella fled from her husband with her lover from Spain. The couple stayed at Belhurst as guests of Miss Harron. The husband tracked the lovers to the castle, and in an attempt to flee him again, they made their way to the wine cellar and tunnels connected to the carriage house. As soon as the lovers entered the tunnel, it collapsed, killing them both. To this day, many visitors have reported seeing a lady in white standing on the front lawn in the middle of the night. When she is approached, she disappears with a loud sighing moan. It is believed by many that the lady in white is Isabella, but some have speculated the apparition is of Miss Harron, after a photo was found of her wearing a long white dress. There have also been reports of other apparitions around the grounds that are believed to be the spirits of the Seneca natives. Floating in the Long Island Sound is an island so steeped in mystery it doesn't appear on any MTA maps, but houses more than 1 million former New York residents, none alive today. Prior to its purchase by New York City in 1868, Hart Island was the site of many tragedies. During the Civil War, it was a prison camp where 235 prisoners were reported to have died and were buried on the island. Shortly after its purchase in 1870, the island played host to a quarantine facility for yellow fever victims. After the epidemic and the many hospital patients that passed, Hart Island housed a women's insane asylum, a tuberculosis hospital, a Cold War Nike missile base, and a prison. Each of the island's reincarnations, only death and mystery served as a constant presence. Today, Hart Island is the United States' largest tax-funded cemetery, with about 1,500 burials taking place each year and over 1 million bodies already buried there, all of which are either unknown or unclaimed. Everyone from destitute individuals to people without relatives or personal records identifying their burial request can be found on this potter's field. Since the 1800s, inmates from Rikers Island have been charged with conducting the burials, from the transporting via ferry to the digging of graves to the burial of the bodies in stacks of 3 feet below the surface. Hart Island is off limits to the public and enforces strict regulations for visiting the grave sites, which have attributed to the rumors of hauntings and added to the already mysterious atmosphere. Today, about 300 to 600 bodies that were first used as medical cadavers are also buried here each year. Adding to the abandoned creepy atmosphere are the forgotten structures left decades ago that include a chapel and a hospital wing. As sad as it is spooky, the tale of Hart Island is the best ghost story you have never heard and the attraction you might want to leave off your list. Holland Road between Angolia and Evangolia State Park is better known as Pigman Road and has been at the forefront of Western New York's legends for years. Area residents, ghost hunters, and teens all have their own takes of the headless ghost, videos, photos, or audio abnormalities and other strange, unexplainable happenings along this mile-long street. Near the train tracks on Pigman Road, a tragedy known as Angolia Horror occurred on December 18, 1867. That night, a 6-car passenger train was heading eastbound to Buffalo. As it approached the bridge, a rear coach axle loosened and worked itself off the tracks, pulling the car in front of it off its moorings too. The rear car broke loose, plunging down the embankment. The 2 massive coal stoves that had come loose during the commotion sent its fiery contents scattered onto the passengers trapped in the car. The whole coach was engulfed in flames, killing 50 people. Today, there are claims that the screams of those who perished in the fire can still be heard. The next legend of Holland Road is one that earned the road its nickname, Pigman Road. It is of a dangerous killer that lurked in the shadows more than 60 years ago. Some say he was a butcher who earned the nickname Pigman because he would often place pig heads on stakes throughout his yard to keep people away. According to legends, one night Pigman was very busy, and to ensure he was left alone, he placed 3 pig heads on stakes at the entrance to his house. This didn't stop his unexpected visitors. 3 teenage boys decided it would be fun to go to Pigman's and bother him. Pigman caught the boys trespassing, and to scare off anyone who decided to trespass again, decapitated each boy one by one, making the other watch and wait so that they knew what would happen to them soon. After he completed the bloody task, he put each head on a stake, then disappeared, never to be seen again. Today, there are rumors of a cult who worships Pigman. Some people who have visited the road report hearing pig noises with no pigs around, and others have reported that they were chased by a half-pig, half-man monster. Originally founded as the Genesee County Poor Farm to house orphan children, destitute families, widows, the elderly, physically handicapped, mentally ill, morally corrupt, and even criminals. Rolling Hills opened its doors on January 1st, 1827. An old stagecoach tavern at the corner of Bethany Center Road and Raymond Road was selected as the location. At the time, it was the center of the county. In 1828, Genesee County built another stone building attached to the original building for the confinement of lunatics and was a repository for paupers committed for misconduct. The insane were housed here until 1887, when the Board of Supervisors decided to send them to another location. Rolling Hills was a self-sufficient working farm with over 200 acres that provided food and fuel. All residents were referred to as inmates, regardless of why they were housed here, and the physically able-bodied would work the farm. There were also many who would build and make wares to sell to help offset some of the living expenses. In 1964, the building served at the Genesee Nursing Home for 25 years before finally being abandoned. In the 1990s, it became the Rolling Hills Carriage Village Shopping Center. It is unclear when it closed, but today it is privately owned. There are many reported hotspots for paranormal activity throughout the building. On the first floor of the East Wing is Hattie's room. The current owner, Sharon, said she left a recorder in this room and caught a clear EVP of an elderly woman saying hello. It is believed to be the former patient Hattie, who was blind and was known to call out to the nurses if she needed them. Roy's room on the first floor is another patient who died here in 1942. When he passed, he was 52 years old and about 7.5 feet tall because of a tumor in his pituitary gland. He is a favorite of staff and is described as a 7-foot-tall shadow man. According to Sharon, Roy came to her rescue one day about 2 months after she moved into Rolling Hills. She had come across a rat in the infirmary and was terrified and screamed and ran away. The next day, she found the rat with its neck broken and a giant bloody handprint on the wall. On the second floor of the East Wing is the men's dormitory, also known as Shadow Hallway. There have been many reports of light gray, medium gray, dark gray, or black shadow people seen here. Some are human-shaped, but some are not clearly defined. It is said they come out of doorways and walk across the hall. Sometimes they will just poke an arm or a leg, or even crawl on the floor, and have even been known to crawl towards you. In another room known as the Christmas room, toys have been reported to move from one side to the other with no explanation. Other reports include footsteps from the floor above the second floor ceiling, even though there is no floor in that room. Rolling Hills is reported to be haunted by many other ghosts throughout the halls as well as the grounds. Many people have reported disembodied voices and shadow people, as well as the sound of distant screams, doors opening and closing on their own. Forest Park Cemetery, known locally as Pinewood Cemetery in Troy, New York, was founded by a wealthy businessman in 1897, but many people believe it was used since 1858. The plan was to be a different experience for those visiting loved ones who were interred here, providing long trails and a park-like experience. Something that would entice people to have their relatives buried here. Unfortunately, it was not a hit, and the cemetery went bankrupt in 1914. Even though the cemetery was never completed to plans, the company was able to build one structure, the receiving tomb at the front of the cemetery. The sole purpose of the structure was to temporarily house the dead during the winter months when the ground was frozen and graves could not be dug. Over the years, the roof has collapsed and most of the graves caved in, but rumors continue of the many unknown spirits haunting the building. People who have visited reported feeling their hair pulled, hearing disembodied voices, seeing strange-looking orbs, receiving unexplainable scratches, and batteries draining quickly. Some people believe the ghosts are of those who were left one winter and never given a proper burial. Others say they were from the bodies that were stolen from Forest Park Cemetery in the 1920s. The tomb and the surrounding land was bought in 1914 by a company that turned around and sold much of the property to a country club. 16 years later, the cemetery went bankrupt again and it was left abandoned. The only caretaker was a local man named William Christian, who took care of it until his death in the 1960s. During this time, it is estimated that over 1,000 bodies were buried on the grounds. Along the walking path lies a very eerie, sinister-looking grave, standing just over 10 feet tall. It is of an angel in front of a cross, but the angel is missing its head. According to legends, back when the cemetery was accessible, a group of boys went in for some spooky fun. When they approached this grave, the angel began to cry tears of blood, which terrified the boys, who then cut the head off and threw it into the woods. Today, it is said that the headless angel statue still bleeds from the neck. Other reports from visitors of the grave say that the sound of children laughing can be heard, and some have claimed to have been poked or tripped. The most famous spirit of Forest Park Cemetery is the Friendly Soldier. Legends say that early in the morning of November 11, 1916, Harold Hubbard, a troubled veteran from Buffalo, was walking past the cemetery on his way back from spending the evening with a local girl. When he approached the cemetery, he decided he couldn't take life anymore and shot himself in the head. People still claim to see Harold walking around the graves at night. It is said that if you look through the front gates, nicknamed the Gates of Hell, and call out Harold 3 times, he will appear and say hello. Some believe he will only appear to those going through extreme mental anxiety, and that he promotes warm, comforting thoughts in those who need it. While many ghosts seem to cause a chill, Harold's spirit brings warm and positive energy to those who visit him. Most people who visit Sleepy Hollow come in search of the well-known spirit, the Headless Horseman. But what many may not know is there is another legend of Sleepy Hollow, the Bronze Lady of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. The larger-than-life bronze statue watches over the mausoleum of a Civil War general, Samuel Thomas. Although she appears more sad and threatening, legends that surround the towering figure say she comes to life and wanders the grounds of the cemetery, terrifying anyone she encounters. According to legends, as you get closer to the Bronze Lady, you will hear her weeping. If you knock on the general's mausoleum door 1 or 3 times, depending on who's telling the story, you will have nightmares that night. If you dare sit on the lap of the bronze lady, she will cry tears of blood. If you insult her by hitting the statue's face, you will be cursed for life. Many visitors have been known to run from the cemetery screaming after their encounter with the Bronze Lady of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. Lake Ronkonkoma is Long Island's largest, deepest lake that is surrounded by white sands and scenic woods. Thousands of people come to the lake every year to enjoy the water and unspoiled natural surroundings, but many locals won't even come here, let alone dip their toes into the water. According to legends, buried deep in the lake's water are many lost bodies, victims of a centuries-old ghost who drags young men to their graves. Legends say that in the 1600s, a young Sanko native princess fell in love with a woodcutter she spotted across the water. The princess caught the eye of the woodcutter, who also fell in love with her, but their love was forbidden because her father would never let her see the English settler. Every day over the next 7 years, the native princess would write love letters on pieces of bark and float them across the water to her beloved, but she never got a response from him. The distraught princess finally rode out into the middle of the lake and stabbed herself in the heart. Ever since, the Lady of the Lake has made it her mission to grab young men from her watery grave to replace her lost love. According to some statistics, between the mid-1800s through the 1990s, there have been about 200 drownings at the lake, and only 3 of those were women. Outside Rochester, New York, is a small town of Ronkonkoma and the location of Durand Eastman Park and the ruins of the White Lady's Castle. Before becoming a park, the area was home to a woman and her beautiful teen daughter. The daughter had many suitors, but her mother was very protective and warned her against the boys. One night, the daughter went for a walk along the shore of the lake, never to return home. The mother believed she had run off with a young man, but the locals believed the daughter was too devoted to her mother not to have returned and thought she must have been murdered. Unable to handle the thought of her daughter's disappearance, the mother began wandering the area with her 2 white dogs, looking for her daughter. People would often see the grief-stricken woman wearing a white dress on her nightly vigils. Years later, the old woman died alone and heartbroken. Eventually, the house fell into despair with nothing but the foundation left. Young teens began to use the area as a lover's lane place and began reporting they had been scared away by a white apparition accompanied by 2 ghostly dogs. Some have even reported seeing the specter rising from the lake, flanked by 2 dogs. The foundation of the former home has been known as the White Lady's Castle. There are still claims today of the White Lady still searching for her daughter. If you ever find yourself sailing up the Hudson River, be sure to tip your hat before going past the deepest part of the river, known as World's End. If you don't, there will be rough waters ahead, courtesy of the Dutch River Imps. These creatures, led by Durand, have long been said to whip up sudden storms, conjure fog in the middle of the day, sink boats and swamping canoes for those who don't pay proper homage by tipping their hats or lowering their sails. Today, many New York Harbor pilots still tip their hats as they pass the point just before Bear Mountain Bridge. The Imps are not the only strange happenings along the Hudson. Legends also tell of a ghost ship thought to be the Flying Dutchman, the ship that paid the terrible price after the captain cursed both God and the devil in order to round Cape Horn safely. Although they did make the difficult passage, they also paid the price with the curse. They were all doomed to sail for eternity, docking at ports just one night every 7 years, unless the crew could find a woman to fall in love with the captain. If they failed, it would be another 7 years of aimless sailing until they were able to port again. Throughout the years, people have claimed to have met some strange people at Tarrytown bars, believing them to be the crew trying to break the spell.